I can only remember one black student in my high school, and we were near graduation. We were on the bus, and somebody asked him where he was going to go to college. His answer was he was going to go to the University of Georgia, basically a white university in the South. Well, this would be 1958. Here was a black kid from Nebraska saying he was going to go to the University of Georgia. People laughed and scoffed at him. Whether he was serious about that or not, I don't know, or if it was just a, no pun intended, an off-color joke. That's when I became cognizant of racial issues.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the 8 Decades podcast. I'm your host, Josiah Freeland, and in this mini podcast series, I'm sitting with my grandpa, Steve Freeland, to explore the past 80 years of American history, looking at it from his perspective and sharing a few of his personal stories. In this second episode, we're going to be diving into the 60s decade, 1960 to 1969. You're going to hear stories about MLK's famous speech, the assassination of President Kennedy, and the first landing on the moon. Those are just a few of the things you're going to hear about in this episode. To start off, let's talk about zip codes.
I knew that didn't exist when I was a kid, but when it became standard, I would have guessed maybe in the mid-70s, if you'd have asked me when I thought it happened.
Zip codes were introduced in 1963.
Is that right? Didn't realize that it was that old. It affected the whole nation. Mm-hmm. It became standard right away, but how long it took for it to become custom. I mean, I can remember getting mail and sending mail without a zip code, even though zip codes were in the process. When, well, even today, I think if you sent something without the zip code, you would probably get it, but you wouldn't get it as quickly. When that was instituted, speaking for myself, I probably had the attitude that, okay, it's no different. It's not a big deal. They might as well have just said, we're raising the stamp from 12 cents to 13 cents. Mm-hmm. It made that kind of an impact.
Yeah.
You know, big deal. Okay. If it benefits the post office, okay.
So creating the zip code was a way of directing the mail to its location faster.
What happened was that they divided the whole country up into little segments and gave it a number. And what today, well, there's at least 9,300 of them, because our zip code is 9270.
Right.
So there's probably 10 or 12, it's probably 10,000 segments, 10,000 zip codes. And you divide the United States up into that and makes it easier for the post office to direct mail. And it makes it easier for us to narrow down where things are to go from a commercial standpoint. And today, the zip code affects more than just the postal service. Mm-hmm. If you go online and you're inquiring about something, one of the questions that's always asked is, what's your zip code? Because whatever the product is that you're researching or that they're selling, that it narrows the scope of their marketing to the type of person that lives in a particular area. If you're a cowboy boot manufacturer, their marketing, they probably wouldn't market Seattle as heavily as they would Wasco, Texas, because they don't wear cowboy boots in Seattle,
right?
Generally speaking. In some respects, the zip code has become racist because based on the zip code, the experts on the zip code can tell you what your nationality is or your color of your skin is most likely to be. You know, 2 houses down from here is a black lady. Across the street, originally, when I moved in, there was a black lady across the street. She's moved on. But my zip code is predominantly white, even though there are some black people in this zip code.
Right.
But, and I don't know what the zip code is, but for southeast Fresno, the Roosevelt High and Sunnyside High area, you're going to have a large Hispanic population. You're going to have a large Hmong population. You're going to have some white population, and you're going to have some black population.
Right.
But the experts, they can tell you if an area is predominantly, well, we don't want to market to that because we're marketing to Asian Americans.
Right.
And they aren't in this zip code or that zip code. We want this other zip code because that's where the people we want to market to live. The demographics is the word that fits with that, and maybe better than racist.
Switching gears, in 1960, the Soviet Union shot down one of the United States U-2 spy planes.
I wasn't there, but yeah, I remember that. That was a big deal because the normal person in the United States wasn't even aware that we were flying spy planes over Russia until that plane was shot down and the pilot was taken captive. I don't remember for how long, and his name slips my memory now, but it was some time before he was freed.
The first human to complete an orbit around the Earth was in 1961. I asked him if he remembers hearing or seeing anything about it.
Well, yeah, it'd never been done before, and the United States was miffed as well as upset because the Russians did it before we did. That was, again, the emphasis in the United States that we needed more scientists and engineers, to combat communism, and ignoring the fact that what the Russians had done was to be admired, really. They had done something that no one else had ever done.
Right. History
Will tell us that they were not able to continue to be the front runner. We were able to surpass them and their efforts.
Around this time, aluminum cans started to pop up. I guess it's kind of debatable on who invented it first, and it's really based on what companies had classified as a canned beverage back then. Regardless, I was curious to know more about how they stored drinks prior to this.
Well, everything was in bottles.
After I got the answer, I realized that was kind of a dumb question.
Not everything, but foods were not in aluminum cans. They were in tin cans, cans made out of tin. It's a different type of material. And drinks, sodas, and beer, and they all came in bottles. So I don't remember when aluminum cans became standard, but I can remember the gradual transition from tins and bottles to aluminum. It was that took place over years. It wasn't any earth-shattering thing that was happening, like the space orbit, Earth orbit. That was right now. That's happening right now. I mean, and it's a big deal. But transition from from glass to aluminum probably took 8-10 years before that became standard. I can remember as a kid walking up and down the highway near where we lived, on the side of the highway, picking up bottles that were redeemable if they didn't have a chip in them, or they weren't broken, because people drank the soda as they were driving along, they'd just throw the bottles out, which is a bad thing to be doing. But, I don't remember. I think we turned in the bottles at 2 cents a piece or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. And that's probably the equivalent to a dime today, would be my guess. But my parents didn't give us an allowance. We worked for whatever money we wanted or needed. So that was, besides delivering the newspapers, that was one way we collected money.
November 22nd, 1963 is the date that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I think this is one of those moments in history that everybody remembers exactly where they were and what they were doing.
Your grandma Connie and I got married in September of 63. And 2 months later, she called me I was home in our apartment studying. Our apartment was in the parking lot, what is now the parking lot of Fresno City College, just off of the railroad tracks. And she was working at community hospital as a ward clerk, and she called me from work to tell me that Kennedy had just been shot. And we didn't know till, I don't know, a few hours later that he had died. And I can remember walking over to the campus, Fresno City College campus, which was 2 blocks from our house, our apartment, and just people walking around and dazed. Somebody had assassinated the president. And that was all that was. We didn't have a TV, but that was all that was on TV for the next 10 days probably. We'd go over to Connie's parents and watch TV and see what was going on. We didn't vote for Kennedy, but we certainly didn't like the idea of someone murdering the president of the United States.
We talked about this for a while, kind of just speaking over how society today is much different than it used to be. Generally speaking, people would have shaken hands to congratulate the opposing side because they had won by playing a better game or strategy. But now it seems to be a lot more divisive.
If we participated in sports, in athletic competitions, regardless of what it is, and regardless of whether it's kids or adults or boys or girls, if we did that in similar fashion to our political actions, we'd be killing people all the time, simply because, sorry, you lost.
Right.
Well, so you end up in a fist fight. It's contrary to the way we as a people, as a nation, live and believe. I remember as a freshman in high school, I didn't play football my freshman year, but we played a football game. We competed against a town called Plattsmouth, which is where my mother grew up, and we beat Bellevue. My school beat the Plattsmouth football team. And after the game, like all games, the coaches crossed the field to shake hands and congratulate you, bum, you beat us, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, the coach and we had beaten Plattsmouth pretty badly. I don't remember the score, but it was probably maybe 20 points better than theirs. The Plattsmouth coach was drunk and took a swing at our coach. That's not the way we should be settling our differences with violence. But that's the way it was then. I mean, there was some of that, and you still see some of it today. Martin Luther came to Fresno. I remember him walking 2 blocks from the apartment.
This was in 1964.
Walking on, it was the City College campus. He was crossing the railroad tracks there on Weldon, just off of Blackstone. So I was aware. I never participated in any of the issues, but I was aware of the issues.
Just a year prior, MLK gave his famous speech, "I Have a Dream." I asked my grandpa if he had listened to it.
Not at the time. I heard parts of it at that time, but and I've heard it, I think, in its totality since. And it was I guess somewhat of a big deal at the time to the common person, but not to the extent that I don't think anybody recognized the importance. Most people didn't recognize the importance of it that we see today. And it was telltale, that almost prophetic, that what he was saying, that this is a desire that we have as a people, and someday we hope to be able to experience it.
Yeah.
And I know times are certainly better today than they were then, but the problem still exists. Not a very good time for a lot of the country, because there's this division this dislike, this accusatory attitude toward other people. That difficult time for a lot of people.
For the listeners that don't know, my grandpa and I are both white. And I say this because I think what my grandpa says in this next clip is important to remember as we keep talking about this.
Being exposed to it, we really are only exposed to it on the fringe. We do not experience their experience, speaking of the black population, because we don't experience the minute that they walk into a store, security all of a sudden is following these people around. We don't experience walking down the street and people yelling out their car windows names. They don't know these people, but they'll call them names or accuse them of things. We hear about it and we might even see it, but we don't experience what that does to that person when that kind of thing happens. It's a sad situation.
The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, which aimed to eliminate racial discrimination in voting.
I was aware at the time that they had passed that law, but I don't think, to me, I didn't understand the complexity of what the steps that they went to. They would say they weren't denying somebody's right to vote, but they were putting so many roadblocks in front of that.
Yeah.
That they really were denying them the right to vote, that you had to name the presidents of the United States in sequential order to be allowed to vote, or that you had to name 10 of the Supreme Court justices, and there are only 9. That whatever you could dream up to make it difficult for a black person to vote.
And then they would just let like a white man just walk through or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't aware of that it was sophisticated or that complex.
Mm-hmm.
But as I look back, it certainly was the right thing. And of course, here 10 years or so ago, the most of the details of the right to vote legislation has been suspended or stopped, but we're doing it again. We're still making it difficult in some cases for people to vote. It served its purpose for a period of time, and I'm not sure that I agree with the cessation of the rules in allowing people to vote.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a while back, it's probably been 8, 10, maybe 12 years that the Supreme Court or Congress or both said that the rules of from 64 or whenever the Right to Vote Act was passed, they've relaxed those rules and eliminated some of the rules and have said that these aren't applicable today. Well, whether they're applicable depends on your perspective, the eyes you're looking through. And most of the states in the South, particularly the South, have met the needs of allowing people to vote. But in other situations, they're still denied the right to vote.
Yeah.
And so I have mixed feelings about the relaxing of those rules, regulations, whatever they're called. Overall, the fairness is still not there. We say that it gives the person the right to vote for better things.
Mm-hmm.
But that isn't the issue. Whether it's better things or not, we give them the right to vote for the good and the bad. What you think is good, I may think is bad. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's bad and you think it's good, shouldn't deny either one of us from being able to vote. State our opinion. That's where we've gotten to the point where we don't want this person to vote because they vote for bad things.
Right.
Whatever that is. And therefore they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Some people think the bad thing is an equal education opportunity. I should be able to send my kid to the same school or a school with the same benefits as these white kids. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a bad thing that you want to be able to send your black kid to the white school.
Right.
So you shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Right.
Because you'd vote for the bad things. That kind of an argument is still prevalent, and that's where I think they've taken some of the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act.
In 1967, the first successful human-to-human heart transplant was performed.
Yeah, that I remember too, for a lot of reasons. One is it was big news, equivalent of the first man in space type news. But my father, your great grandfather, worked for Creighton University in the animal research laboratory. He was the manager of all the animals. He helped perfect the heart transfer equipment, helped develop that by the doctors using animals, primarily dogs, at the university. And so that heart transplant was a big deal personally because of what my father did for a living. And he's on the fringe of what's happening, but I've got a book written by one of the doctors there at the university that he mentions my father in the book about his managing of the animals. And, most of the stuff in the book I don't understand. It's scientific and all that, but that was a big deal, and in an indirect way was personal because of what my dad and lots of other people like him had participated in the different research projects and so on. And this one of the doctors my dad had worked with or for when I was in high school, and this would be almost 8, 9, 10 years earlier, I worked for also, because when I was in high school, I had a part-time job cleaning the equipment in bacterial lab at the university, and cleaning test tubes and petri dishes and sterilizing them and so on. And this doctor, his name slips my memory right now, is one of the doctors that wrote this book where he mentions my father. So that was an unbelievable to a lot of people, and of course today we take it for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens every day, but for that first one to come along was a big deal.
The first landing on the moon was July 20th, 1969. During the research of this project, this is one of the things that shocked me the most, just how recent it was. I'm not sure why I had the understanding that it was so much farther in history.
This guy I worked with, we stood out on the parking lot at the restaurant and looked up at the moon and said, we could not believe that there were 3 people sitting up there on the moon, 2 of them having walked on it. You know what, even today, is more mind-boggling to me, is that they got all this on film.
That is kind of crazy to think about, right? I mean, the first digital camera was invented 6 years later in 1975. And even then, they weren't regularly available or accessible until the mid-90s. So they had to take up a big, heavy, hard-to-use film camera.
That boggles my mind, the fact that they can get somebody up to the moon, but they're able to do it on the camera. That's crazy. And that somebody even thought about seeing that was done. Just, it's amazing. And there are still people that deny that ever happened.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Take it a step further. Why did the film not melt on the re-entry?
That's a good point.
They had to do something to protect that, obviously the astronauts, but they had to do something also to protect the film from disintegrating. It's no wonder it cost us so much.
Right. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. What would you say if you were the first person to land on a planet? Or
I would have said, man, this is crazy.
Thank you so much for listening to the second episode of this project. In the third episode, we'll be discussing the 70s decade, stories about starting a family, President Nixon's secret scandal, and the first landing on planet Mars. See you next week. The history in this podcast series was fact-checked by Jeffrey Copeland, sound design by Bijoy Ahmed, video backgrounds by Nathaniel Agueros, and the episodes were directed and edited by me, Josiah Freeland. A special thank you to my grandpa, Steve Freeland, for letting me share his stories and perspectives. This production was made possible in part by the Community Media Access Collaborative.
The first thing we're likely to see after Viking 1 touches down is Martian soil. It may look like this Earth's sand. More likely it will not. The camera will shoot the surface at the base of this footpad, enabling scientists to immediately analyze the depth of dust or soil found on Mars.